Hi Guy, and welcome to episode 8 of the AMIGArama podcast. I'm your host Lorfarius, and this week we're going to be having a look at Team 17's Worms. Now before we get into the game, of course, we're going to have a look at some news, but first things first, I've had a bit of a problem with my A1200. Basically, the joystick port has been playing up, and I've been talking to a chap over on eBay who does like recapping services and stuff, and I was thinking like maybe I need to get it recapped and redone and everything. And then I started having a weird problem where my compact flash card just would not read properly at all. It was getting slower and slower. It would work fine in a PC. I managed to try it in another Amiga. It would work fine there. Just on this 1200, it just wouldn't read properly at all. I tried swapping out the compact flash adapter inside. I tried a new IDE cable. I even tried a new flash card, so I know it wasn't the flash card at all. But anyway, I went to this guy on eBay. He's basically going to supply me with a freshly recapped board. I will, of course, do your full recommendation because I know he listens to the podcast, but I'm just going to wait for it to arrive first. I'm quite excited, actually, because a freshly recapped board. I've got a brand new special... Well, I've got a special power pack for it, so I'm really looking forward to trying it out, so I'll report back on that. One of the bits of news I wanted to report this week is, I noticed this on Indie Retro News. Great site. I do get quite a lot of news off there, I will admit. But someone's released something called The Mirror Game. There is a trailer on there, and there's an LHA download and an ADF as well if you've only got like a Gotek drive or something, or you can burn the discs on. But this is a very unique game. It's all based around robots and puzzles, and you've got two robots on an individual screen which is split down the middle, and there's different puzzles on the left and right, and it's very hard to describe, but if you move the character left, the character on the other side, on the mirrored side, actually copies the movements, and you have to move them backwards and forwards and work your way through puzzles, and it's quite a unique thing to do, and it looks very, very tough. Like I said, there's a full video on there. I'll stick the link in the show notes, but I thought it was pretty interesting. Now, another thing that I noticed this week, I'm not sure, you're probably not aware of this if you're outside the UK, but back in the early to mid-90s, most of the regular gaming news come from a teletext TV service. Now, if you're not sure what teletext is, it's a bit like the internet for the TV back in the day. And basically, if you're watching normal TV, you press a text button and it'd be a black screen. It'd be very, very basic, like ASCII type pictures and coloured text and arts. It's very, very basic. It's not actual images on the screen and stuff. So you'd have all these different groups of people making almost like magazines, but news and information, selling holidays, shares, that sort of thing. And there was something called Digitizer, which was run by one chap called Mr. Biffle mainly, but back in the day it was quite a famous thing in the UK. I think it was said something like 1.2 million viewers or readers, I don't know what you call them, so to speak, but he quite well, and I don't know what the right word is, it's not well renowned, but quite infamous for the shocking lack of Amiga footage Amiga news and reviews, and they didn't really cover it as a system. And he's been doing something called Digitizer 2000, where he's been looking back at his time there, because he basically does like script writing and stuff. He doesn't work in games or anything anymore, but he does this site and he goes back over games. He does it in his spare time and thing. It's actually quite an entertaining site, because the whole thing back on teletext in the day was very, very funny. He did this whilst he was growing up, so I think he was in his early 20s or something like that. So he's practically, almost a kid, I suppose. I don't know if you can really call him that. But it was quite shocking that he absolutely hated on the Amiga, and people seemed very, very wound up and annoyed back in the day if you were into the Amiga to any degree. And I do remember quite a bit, because you wanted them to be covering the reviews, and there was all these great Amiga games that were coming out, and they just didn't do it. And he basically admitted the other day on his site, I'll stick a link in the show notes, but they just didn't have an Amiga because they had to buy all their own computers. And as time was going on and they did get the opportunity to get one, they sort of realised that the Amiga was coming towards the end of its days, because it would have been about 93, 94, and everything was moving away from that, and it was all focusing on games and stuff. And he does go into the reason quite properly, and it's actually quite entertaining, so it's well worth a read. Now, the other bit of news that I came across, there's a website called AMIGAX1000.blogspot.co.uk, and someone there has discovered that a model of monitor can actually take an Amiga signal through the back, because you have to have 15 kilohertz to get an Amiga out on VGA, which most mods, especially not these days, just will not take it. They don't have the modes for it. You might have a bit of luck if you go back, say, about 8, 9, 10 years even to find something, but that's not always easy to do. But this guy's discovered that the Acer V22 HQL, there's also a 19, so there might be a V19. I'm not entirely sure on that one. I will stick the link into the show notes. But yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting that, because I mean, I'm using a SCART cable coming to the back of my TV. It has got a VGA on the back of it, and it's quite an old set, so I don't know if it'd take it or not from the Amiga. But even if it does, I mean, these monitors, you know, they're about from 2014-15, so you can pick them up from about £30-40. Maybe a bit more, it depends, I suppose, because postage is always a bit of a pain. But yeah, it's really great. You get a special VGA adapter for the back of the Amiga, and you're up and off you go. And this guy was testing out. There's loads of pictures on his blog site, and it's worked with all the games, and he's not had any problems. So probably the best picture you'll get out of an Amiga until like the HDMI converter comes out. Now, another thing that did happen, that's pretty much it for the news, but I did have a comment put on AMIGArama.com about a week ago, I think, just as I was putting out the last episode, so I didn't get a chance to talk about it. But the chap is called, and I really do apologise, I can't pronounce this name, it's Przemslaw Duchnik or Duchnicki. Again, I fully apologise. My accent is terrible, and I've probably messed that right up. But he just left a quick comment, just saying things like, "After 6 episodes, I can say that you're my favourite Amiga Games podcast. Thank you very much." I mean, I know there's only a few of us in the English world, but it's awesome knowing that someone actually likes what I'm doing. Great job, considering that you're doing everything by yourself. You know, I am quite proud so far of what I've been doing and the length of the shows and everything. I mean, I'm sure it can improve. I'm trying new things as we go along. But anyway, and then he's put, it would be perfect if you could squeeze a few more details in regards to game authors and developers on top of all. Now, I am trying my best with that. I mean, it depends what I can actually source and things. I mean, one of the things I've been doing more and more as we go on each week is I've been trying to dig out like interviews and I've started downloading and reading lots and lots of Amiga mags, because I'm hoping to start getting like interviews from back in the day and comments and stuff like that. And if I can stretch it out with more developer news and things they've said, I will do. And as for listing them, sometimes, I mean, I have thought of coming out with a full list, but with a lot of games, they can have like 10 to 15 people, and I always worry that if I sit there and start reading out a huge list of names, I'll just lose people straight away. So I've tended to shy away from it a bit and just stick to, like, say, oh, like this week, you know, it's Team 17, and maybe say 1 or 2 developers and spread out on a bit of a story and stuff. But I'll see what I can do. Like I say, I'm trying to improve the show, so we'll see how it goes from there. It's time to move on to this week's game. Now, I've gone and chosen Worms because it's probably one of the more popular Amiga titles. It's probably one of those defining games, one of the things that sticks out in people's mind whenever they think out. Now, there was also a director's cut, so I'm sort of going to lump these together. It's cheating a bit, but basically the director's cut was released a bit later. There's only 5,000 copies from what I could find available online. Which is incredibly short run, but again, this is pretty late in the Amiga's life. It's very hard to get hold of now. I've got it as an extra option on WHD load. I suppose I'm effectively pirating it, but what can I say? I'm also using a GoTech drive. I'm a villain. Anyway, back in the day then, 95, it was published by Ocean, which did surprise me actually. I always thought Team 17 published their own games, because they developed it and so on. It came out in 95. It's pretty much ported to every single system known to man at the time, and it's still going to this day. I think there was a game came out in 2012 for it. Now, originally, it was the full game was developed for an Amiga format competition, and it was a guy called Andy Davidson. At the time, it was called Total Wormage. Now, he sent it off for competition and stuff. He didn't win. They didn't think it was good enough. And then, just by chance, he went to a European computer trade show in 1994. And he saw Team 17 with a stand, and there's interviews and stuff online with him. And he actually wandered over to their stall. And he actually said he was pretty much praying that he didn't know what was going to happen or what they'd make of it. But the guy behind, they realised they had something really special there. I mean, Team 17 were pretty good Amiga company, for God's sake, but one of their biggest things at the time was like Alien Breed, and they had no idea what they were about to take on, but luckily they saw something special, so they snapped it open. It's pretty much been with them ever since. Now, this guy, Andy Davidson, he left after making Worms Armageddon in 1999, did a few things dotted around, and I've got some here that he opened a bar in 2007 called, I think, the iBar. Very odd. But then a few years later in 2012, to basically help re-release Worms on Steam, he came back to the company, and as far as I can tell, he's been with them since. So yeah, a bit of an odd one. I always assumed that Team 17 just developed Worms themselves and made it for something special. But when you start looking into the history and stuff, it was pretty much all made by one guy. I mean, you can see this video footage from an old program called Bad Influence, which was on the UK on ITV at the time. And it was basically just like a gaming and news show that was on once a week. And he had a full interview on there. You could see it all in action and stuff. It's pretty early days, but I mean, it's pretty much all the Worm stuff is there with the graphics and the fans. I mean, for one person, maybe it wasn't. Maybe I don't know what happened there, but maybe it got other teams came in later to do the redesigns. I think the AGA version has got a lot more advanced backgrounds and improved graphics and stuff. So they did make some sort of changes as time went on. But it's a bit of a funny one, This guy effectively created this single gaming empire. I mean, Worms is still a pretty huge franchise, and for it to be going to this day that's pretty impressive. Now, the game doesn't have a story to speak of, but to be honest, it's a turn-based artillery shooter. Is that the right term for it? I mean, what can you call Worms with weapons but that? But it's very, very similar to games of that style from like the early 80s and later on, like Combat style, and it's you pitted against someone else. The difference is you take turns this way round. Now, the whole thing is very, very similar in look and in a way style to Lemmings. You're not based around like puzzles to get around, but just the fact that you've got these small, tiny characters with the very cute, funny voices and the way they interact with things. I mean, going back in memory, because I played this with friends as a kid, so I've always had this version of the game in my mind that I played, and it did surprise me returning back and firing up the Amiga this time, just how basic it does actually look. Because I think in my mind I played it around about 2001-2 when there was a later edition come on, and all the Worms are turned into nice lovely like 2D graphics and things, and the weapons were more fantastical and things like that, but it just never stuck with me. And then when I sat down to play it and I looked at it and I thought, oh, this is definitely not what I remember. But one of the great things it does have is a big selection of weapons. Now, when I was going through it, I think there's about 10 weapons. It's a few examples. You've got like the bazooka, which is obviously a nice big mounted rocket on your shoulder. Things like a shotgun, and you can plant mines and fire an Uzi. Drill through the ground and fight people. And one of the funny voices, I always think he's shouting like in Street Fighter 2, like Hiroken or Shiroken. God, I can't even do the voice. But there was another weapon I did bring back some very fond memories, I think called the Ninja Rope, And it's just absolutely fantastic because it's basically like a bit of a hook shot, and you can sling it across and go sliding across and knock people off things and have all sorts of fun just working your way around the level. The worms themselves are pretty mobile. You can, well, I say that, they move quite slowly, but you can get them to jump and hop around a bit and get around to different parts of the level, but a lot of the time you have to use the weapons to blow things up and bits of the scenery and able to get around them. God, I would hope that everybody who's listening to this has pretty much played Worms. If you hadn't, you need to go and play it now. It's one of them must-have things just to try in its basic format. Now, one of the greatest things about it is that it's such a huge multiplayer game. Now, when I played this as a kid, I was quite lucky. I had no idea what I was getting into, but I would go around and be like 3 or 4 of us all around at the time at my mate's house. You know, we'd load it up on the disc and stuff, and we'd have hours of fun with it, just crazy fun and backstabbing each other and getting up to all sorts, just trying to defeat the other team. But that's mainly what the big push of the game is all about. There's not much of it. There is a single player campaign, but there isn't much of one because it's all really based around that team play and multiplayer. One of the other great things about it, it's just full of like British humour. It's lots of different voices, like that lemmings, and like, oh no, that high pitched squeaking sound. A lot of them are different funny ones like that. There's like Scottish accent in there and different funny jokes and stuff. And when characters die, you get like funny text scrolls at the bottom. And I don't know, it always reminds me of Monty Python. It's just that level of humour. I mean, there's a bit in it like called the Holy Hand Grenade, which is from the Monty Python and the Holy Grail film. And I can actually remember playing that at the time, and I didn't quite get what it was. And then just by chance, shortly after first playing it, I managed to see that film, and you know, the bit with the grenade, and it all just came to mind. Absolutely brilliant. But what a funny thing to include into it. Now, the CD32 version of this, which I've tried, but I didn't really play extensively, that's actually meant to be the better one, but I didn't find that out till much later. But that does come with like a full video intro. It's nothing amazing. It's just basically a few worms with weapons doing funny things and shooting at each other. It's not like this full video throughout the game or an incorporated story or anything. One of the main things about this is, or with Lemmings, I suppose, in a way, is when you would look at the background in Lemmings, you wouldn't have like any fantastical looking backgrounds. It'll all be quite basic and well, it was just, I suppose it was the times. But the thing with Worms is it went way beyond that. You had nice scrolls in the background and really gorgeous graphics and stuff, and then the bit at the forefront was actually quite good for the times, even though the worms themselves were quite basic. I'm not sure why they were that sort of basic, I mean, especially compared to some of the Amiga games, but it was probably quite a pretty huge games. Now the DC cut, of course, has lots of different terrains, and it's just basically they've just designed some extra levels and throw them all in. But because it's got the AGA side to it, you've got a lot nicer graphics. You know, these things like custom levels and teams and stuff like that. So you can expand it a lot more. You can do it's a lot better than the basic version. It's really difficult to pick out complaints about this or bad points. I mean, probably the biggest issue is the fact that it's not really a single player game. Yes, it does have a campaign with very, very basic missions, but the problem is, even if you just have like standard matches or standalone against the computer, the problem is because you're on your own, after a while, that does get a bit boring. There's not very much of a challenge there, you know, for you to get into. I suppose there is, because, you know, a lot of the time the computer can either be spot on perfect, or it really does very, very silly things, or it'll just walk itself off a cliff or spend ages moving left or right just to waste time, and whilst it's trying to decide what to do. And then at other times it'll make like a shot right across the entire map, and it might be like the grenade or something, or the rocket or something like that, and it'll hit you bang on target, and you just sit there and you think, I've never been able to do that. So it does have its problems, but then at the same time, it is really meant to be a multiplayer game. You ideally need like probably two to four people, maybe, you know. It needs to be played with a group of people, because I mean, I have very fond memories of sitting there and having a great laugh with my mates and stuff, and I mean, then you go to school and stuff. There's, I think you'd be talking around and waiting for the next match and what you could get up to. You could spend ages plotting out all these villainous things you could get up to. Another would be, and this is more of a personal thing, but I mean, I play the later games, so I was more used to seeing, at least in my mind, seeing all these different weapons and stuff like that. And it seems a bit basic only having 10 weapons, but again, at the time, it's like when you first played the original Lemmings, it's like, I think Lemmings 2 is meant to be the much better game with more things to do and better puzzles and stuff, but you've always got the original go back to, and just a shame, this could have probably just done with some more weapons in there. I don't know, I really am nitpicking just to get to it. So looks all I can pick on is like the lack of a single player campaign, the AI, and just me being terrible. What more can I say? Now you might be thinking, what's the conclusion to this? It's a great game, there's not very many bad points to get. Is this even a review? And the thing is, I'm not entirely sure. It's very hard to, despite thinking, I'll go into this and I'll be able to talk about this, that, and the other one. I had all these fun experiences as a kid, but returning back to it to these days, and I'm completely on my own, and which is a bit sad in a way, isn't it? But going back as a single player, it's very tough. I mean, I can see the same underlying game there. It's great. It still looks great for the graphics of the time, and I wish I could play it with more people. Sadly, I don't have them. I mean, it did make me side wonder, because I think there is a way of getting the Amiga online, either with an Ethernet card in the side, or possibly a wireless card, something like that. I mean, does anybody know? Is there some sort of like Amiga Worms online community still going, or some sort of games? I might be talking absolute rubbish, but if you can get the system online, then effectively someone could jiggy something into the side of the game. You could probably have online matches with other people. I'm actually going to, if anybody knows anything, by all means stick that in the comments, because I'm going to have a lot. We could possibly come up with some challenge matches or something. Who knows? I'm just going off on a tangent there. But it's a great game overall. I mean, I do have fond memories of, even when you're playing this with other people, you might think, you've got to wait for your turn and things like that. But the great thing about it was, because of the humour and the way it all interacts, and it's sort of cartoon, like even with the basic graphics with the actual worms themselves, you can clearly see everything and what's going on. Even though it could have been better, it looks more than good enough, and it's often entertaining, and it's quite funny. I did actually try it, because I just wanted to see what it was like. I tried sticking on the computer versus the computer for a few matches, just to see what it was like and what they could come up with. And that's also how I came up with my ideas about the AI, not just with me playing it, but watching them. They're far too good, or they're far too terrible. It's very hard to say, but yeah, it's quite an entertaining game to watch. There's a lot there. Would I say go back to it? Again, no, if you're on your own, it's a bit of a curio. You can have a dabble and a wonder, but if you've got someone else you can play with, if you've got some mates coming around, or you can take your Amiga somewhere, by all means, stick it all in. It's all turn-based, so you can all share the same mouse and have a laugh and stuff like that. And yeah, it's a bit of a shame it's got a depressing single player, because like Lemmings doesn't. I mean, it's a different sort of game, but it's of that style, and they could have done something a bit better and maybe expanded more missions and come up with clever ways of getting people involved. Just give those loners something to do in the mean, especially in the future when we can't go back to it. So yeah, so you need a lot of friends to to come and play with this. I mean, at the time, reviews-wise, it did extremely well, actually. I mean, it was pretty much 90% plus from pretty much everything I could find. Like, CU Amiga gave it 94%. The One Magazine, they gave it 94 as well. Amiga Format, 90%. Pretty much everywhere I looked at. And to be honest, it's no surprise, because at the time, I bet they were mostly sitting in office with other people on either the same magazine or others. And they've been able to have a laugh and play with people from different offices and things. It wouldn't have just been a standalone game. They really got into the multiplayer. But I do wonder if that made a bit of the original reviews biased in a way. It's no surprise that Worms pretty much went on to conquer the world after this. I think pretty much Team 17 just survives off the back of Worms these days, because it still does extremely well whatever it comes out on. And they always go back. They did have a crack at a 3D attempt later on. I had a quick go with it. It's not very good. But then I think Lemmings struggled the same when they did a 3D version of that, but it's like, say, playing Solitaire. I mean, as a kid growing up, I would play Solitaire and Minesweeper to death on my actual PC, but there's no need for them to be in 3D space. I'm sure there are actual 3D games. In fact, when I had a go on the Oculus Rift last year, I think I did get to play one with a virtual reality car game. You just think, what's the point? It's cards at the end of the day. And it's the same sort of thing with this. It's perfect in 2D. There's no need for them to go beyond that. And they pretty much stuck to that. I mean, look, different these days because they just tend to put in more weapons, expand the levels, and it's a bit graphically better. And in a way, it looks like the modern versions look like Angry Birds. So has it taken off like Angry Birds? Actually, I don't actually know because I'm not sure what the sales figures were like for the current game. But seeing as Team 17 don't really bring out masses and masses of games. You had the odd release along the way, like the Alien Breed titles, I think, on Xbox Live and stuff. So they pretty much flogged this to death, I think, as much as they can. But at least we're still getting Worms, I suppose. And I think the modern version actually has an online edition. So maybe you don't need the Amiga one. Who knows? But I'd be interested to find out. Now, on that note, I think that's the perfect time to end the show. And I just want to thank all you guys for listening. I know this is a new podcast and we are getting there quite well. I'm going to have mistakes and stuff going along the way, but I am trying my best. I do look into each and every episode as deep as I can. I mean, a lot of it is coming from like magazines, or I've not really looked at Wikipedia. I'm sure a lot of you will be happy to know, but if I can find interviews or videos or stuff with information in, I will incorporate it into the show, but I'm still learning as we go along. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening. As always, keep your ears open for next week's episode and look forward to it.